In the age of iron and steam, they told you the sound of the factories was the sound of progress. The truth is, it was the sound of a new kind of heartbeat, one that did not require a soul. They called them the Silent Wardens, the tireless men who worked the most dangerous machines, who never slept, who never spoke, who never bled. Before we descend into the smoke and fire, a warning. This channel is a forge. We burn away the gilded lies of history to reveal the scorched steel truth beneath. If you seek easy histories of inventors and kings, you are lost. But if you are ready to witness the birth of the modern world, forged from flesh and steel in a fire you were never meant to see, then subscribe. Show that you are not afraid of the fire. The horror of the Wardens was not that they were exploited. It was that they were inventions, the culmination of a terrible new science that sought to solve the problem of human frailty, a secret alchemy that could take a broken body from a workhouse morgue and reclaim it, not resurrection, reclamation, creating a perfect, tireless golem of flesh and steel, animated not by a holy word but by a clockwork heart and a chemical fire. Our story begins in the smog-choked heart of 19th-century London, a city of grotesque wealth and abject poverty, and at its center stood the Ashworth Ironworks, a cathedral of industry owned by a man who saw human beings not as workers but as flawed, organic machines. He didn't want to hire men, he wanted to build them, and in the secret basements beneath his roaring forges, in a place he called the Reclamation Forge, he was perfecting his design. The architect of this new genesis was Lord Harrington Ashworth. To the public, he was a captain of industry, a peer of the realm whose iron built the empire's bridges and railways. In private, he was a zealot of a different faith. He saw the human body as a poorly designed engine, prone to fatigue, emotion, and death. His eyes, the color of cold iron, saw not men but components. His voice, a low rumble like the grinding of distant gears, spoke of a future where the weak link of the flesh would be reinforced with the unwavering certainty of steel. The man who made Ashworth's vision a reality was Dr. Silas Croft. A disgraced anatomist and surgeon, Croft had been cast out of the Royal College for his heretical belief that life was not a divine spark, but a mere chemical and electrical process. He saw death not as an end, but as a temporary mechanical failure. His hands were a terrifying paradox, the long, delicate fingers of a watchmaker paired with the thick, calloused palms of a butcher. He was the only man in England with the surgical skill to mend flesh and the mechanical genius to replace it. The Ashworth Ironworks was a monument to this philosophy. By day, it was a living hell, a cacophony of steam hammers and roaring furnaces where mortal men toiled in smoke and fire. But its true heart beat deep underground in the Reclamation Forge. To descend into it was to leave the world of men behind. The chaotic roar of the upper levels faded, replaced by a low, rhythmic, metronomic hum. The air, thick with coal smoke above, became clean and cold here, laced with the sharp, sterile scent of ozone, hot metal, and something sickly sweet, the smell of cooked blood. It was a symphony of morgue and foundry. Marble slabs for autopsies lay next to casting molds for steel joints. Trays of gleaming surgical tools sat beside blacksmith's tongs. Racks of glass vials filled with shimmering, conductive fluids stood next to crucibles of molten steel. This was where Croft performed his unholy sacrament. This was where flesh was reforged. The raw material for this new workforce came from the city's endless supply of the dead. The cholera epidemics and the grinding poverty of the workhouses ensured a steady stream of fresh cadavers. Lord Ashworth found a willing partner in Mr. Thomas Grimshaw, the master of the St. Giles workhouse. For a generous monthly stipend paid in gold sovereigns, Grimshaw performed a simple, ghoulish service. When a pauper died, he would sign the death certificate, but the body would not be sent to a crowded potter's field. Instead, in the dead of night, a plain, unmarked wagon from the Ashworth Ironworks would arrive at the workhouse morgue. Grimshaw was a man who had perfected the art of moral justification. He saw himself not as a ghoul, but as a pragmatist. These poor souls are already lost to God and man, he would tell himself, counting Ashworth's gold in the gloom of his office. Is it not a greater mercy for their bodies to serve a purpose in the great engine of progress than to simply rot in the mud? Lord Ashworth is not defiling the dead. He is giving them a second, more useful life. It was a lie he repeated so often, he had come to believe it was a prayer. The first warden was designated Unit 1. The body had belonged to a young Irish laborer named Finn, who had fallen into a V. Out of molten iron, what little remained of him was brought to the Reclamation Forge. This was Croft's first true test. He worked for 72 hours without rest, his face illuminated by the stark, blue-white light of an arc lamp. He began by salvaging what he could of the organic matter. He then constructed a new skeleton from articulated steel, with piston-driven joints and a reinforced ribcage of tempered iron. The true innovation, the heart of the Warden, was the etheric heart. It was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, a clockwork pump, powered by a core of refined coal and a volatile chemical mixture, designed to circulate a superoxygenated, conductive fluid through the remaining veins and arteries. It did not beat with the soft rhythm of life. It ticked and whirred with the relentless, metronomic certainty of a machine. Croft then painstakingly grafted the salvaged skin and muscle tissue onto the steel frame, weaving a network of fine copper wires directly into the nerve endings. The final piece was the cerebral governor, a small, intricate device of brass and crystal that he implanted at the base of the skull. It was not designed to restore consciousness. It was designed to prevent it. It delivered a constant, low-level electrical current to the brainstem, bypassing the higher functions entirely. The Warden would be capable of complex motor tasks, but it would have no memory, no will, no self. It would simply obey. The moment of reclamation was a scene from a new kind of Genesis story. Lord Ashworth stood by, his face a mask of iron control, as Croft made the final connection. A switch was thrown. The etheric heart began to tick. The conductive fluid surged. The body on the marble slab convulsed, and then slowly, with the stiff, graceless movement of a newborn automaton, Unit 1 sat up. Its eyes were open, but they were the dull, lifeless eyes of a doll. There was no recognition, no fear, no soul. Just a machine, waiting for its first command. The Silent Wardens were introduced into the ironworks one by one, always on the night shift, where the shadows were deep and the mortal workers too exhausted to notice the strangeness of their new colleagues. The official story was that they were deaf-mutes from a remote workhouse, hired for their ability to withstand the deafening noise. The lie was simple, and in a place where men were broken and replaced with terrifying regularity, it was accepted. The Wardens were a marvel of horrific efficiency. They could lift weights that would break a normal man's back. They could stand for hours in the searing heat of the furnaces without flinching. They never tired. They never complained. They moved with a steady, rhythmic purpose, their movements dictated by the ticking of their clockwork hearts. They were the perfect workers. But the mortal men who worked alongside them felt a deep, primal unease. It wasn't just their silence, it was their stillness. When a task was done, a warden would simply freeze, standing perfectly motionless for hours until its next sequence of tasks was initiated. And there was the smell, a faint, sweet, cloying odor of ozone and hot metal that seemed to cling to them, a smell that was deeply, fundamentally unnatural. The first person to understand the truth was a young boy named Kit. An orphan, he worked as a scrapper, darting through the dangerous machinery to collect fallen pieces of iron. His small size and quickness made him almost invisible, and he saw things others missed. He saw that the Wardens never ate, never drank, never even wiped the soot from their faces. He saw the strange, rhythmic ticking sound that seemed to come from their chests when he got close. One night, a chain snapped on an overhead crane, dropping a crucible of molten steel. In the chaos, a warden was struck, its arm torn open by a massive piece of shrapnel. Kit, hiding behind a pile of slag, watched with wide, terrified eyes. The warden did not scream. It did not bleed red blood. From the deep gash in its arm, a thick, shimmering, silvery fluid oozed out, and beneath the torn flesh, Kit saw not bone, but the glint of polished steel pistons and coiling copper wire. The warden simply stood there, its arm mangled, ticking calmly, until another warden came, took it by the shoulder, and led it away towards the deep, forbidden levels of the Reclamation Forge. Kit knew then, these were not men. They were things made of metal and dead flesh. With his prototypes proven, Lord Ashworth began to dream of a silent, tireless empire. He no longer saw the Wardens as replacements for his factory workers. He saw them as the blueprint for a new class of soldier, servant, and laborer. He envisioned armies that felt no fear, miners who required no air, servants who possessed no will. He instructed Dr. Croft to refine the process, to make the Wardens stronger, faster, and, most importantly, more indistinguishable from the real thing. Croft, driven by a fusion of scientific pride and Ashworth's limitless funding, achieved breakthroughs that were both brilliant and monstrous. He developed a new synthetic musculature, a weave of steel fiber and organic tissue that could repair minor tears on its own. He refined the etheric heart, making it smaller, quieter, and more powerful. His greatest and most terrible innovation was in their faces. Using a new, pliable form of gutta percha and subtle clockwork mechanisms beneath the skin, he gave the Wardens the ability to produce a limited range of placid, non-threatening facial expressions. They could now offer a faint, serene smile or a look of calm attentiveness. They were no longer just silent automatons. They were becoming perfect, unnerving mimics of humanity. Kit, the young scrapper, was now a ghost in Ashworth's machine, his fear replaced by a desperate, obsessive need to understand. He started mapping the patrol routes of the mortal foreman, learning the layout of the ironworks' hidden passages. He knew the truth was in the Reclamation Forge. He had to see it. He spent weeks observing, waiting for his chance. It came during a shift change, a rare moment of confusion when the mortal day shift workers were leaving, and the silent, nocturnal wardens were being activated. Kit slipped through a maintenance hatch and began his descent into the ironworks' hellish heart. He followed the clean, cold smell of ozone, the path lit by the eerie blue glow of distant arc lamps. What he found in the Reclamation Forge was a production line for nightmares. He saw bodies laid out on marble slabs, their limbs systematically amputated and replaced with steel prosthetics. He saw Croft, moving with the detached precision of a god, grafting skin onto a metal hand. He saw vats of the shimmering, silvery fluid and racks of ticking etheric hearts, waiting to be implanted. But the most damning discovery was in a locked office adjoining the main forge. Peering through a grimy window, Kit saw Lord Ashworth at a massive desk. Spread before him were not factory blueprints but military contracts and city planning documents. He was meeting with a shadowy consortium of men, a general from the War Office, a colonial governor, a powerful industrialist. Kit couldn't hear their words, but he could see what they were looking at, detailed schematics for a new model of Warden. Warden Mark IV Colonial Policing Unit. It was designed for extreme heat, with enhanced strength and a feature labeled Intimidation Protocol, a deep, resonant hum emitted from the chest cavity. Ashworth wasn't just building workers. He was building an army of colonial slave drivers, an army of monsters to enforce the will of the empire. This is the precipice, the moment a dark secret metastasizes into a global threat, when the monster in the basement is about to be unleashed upon the world. If you understand the gravity of this turning point, share this story. Let others see the true cost of progress. Hit the like button as a sign that you are bearing witness. And subscribe, because the final stage of this story is not about the creation of monsters, but about their deployment. In another corner of the forge, Kit found the failures. These were wardens who had suffered catastrophic mechanical breakdowns. They were not repaired, they were disassembled for parts. One lay on a table, its chest cavity open. Kit stared in horrified fascination at the exposed etheric heart, its gears still ticking softly, its tiny crystal regulators glowing with a faint inner light. Beside it lay a small, leather-bound ledger, Croft's reclamation log. Kit grabbed the logbook. He didn't know how to read most of the scientific jargon, but he could read the names. Names of the dead from the St. Giles workhouse, each followed by a unit designation, and next to each name, a list of upgrades and modifications. The last entry made his blood run cold. It was the name of his own father, a man who had died in the workhouse a year ago. Daniel Kit, SR. Subject 37 designated for Mark IV prototype. They had taken his father. They were turning his father into one of the colonial monsters. His quest for knowledge had become a mission of vengeance. Clutching the ledger, Kit scrambled back into the shadows, his heart no longer just pounding with fear, but with the cold, hard rhythm of absolute purpose. Kit's grief hardened into a cold, diamond-sharp plan. He was a creature of the ironworks. He knew its rhythms, its weaknesses, its volatile, fiery heart. He knew he could not fight Lord Ashworth or his steel Goliaths. He could only unmake them, using the very elements of their creation, fire and iron. His target was the heart of the entire operation, the central pressure regulator for the massive steam engines that powered the entire factory, including the Reclamation Forge's hidden generators. It was a place of immense, terrifying power, a cathedral of brass pipes and hissing valves, located deep in the Cetori's sub-basement. A catastrophic failure there wouldn't just stop the factory, it would turn the entire ironworks into a multi-story bomb. He found an unlikely and unwilling ally in a man named Arthur Machen, a disgraced journalist who now wrote penny dreadfuls about mad scientists and clockwork men. Kit, clutching Croft's ledger, sought him out in a grimy Fleet Street pub. Machen, a cynic drowning in cheap gin, initially dismissed Kit's story as the fantasy of a traumatized child, a plot from one of his own cheap novels. But Kit did not come with just a story. He opened the ledger. Machen, whose mind was steeped in the fiction of Gothic horror, stared at the neat, clinical handwriting detailing the reanimation of the dead, the schematics for the etheric heart, the list of names. He recognized the handwriting style of Dr. Silas Croft, a man whose fall from grace he had covered years ago. He saw the name of the workhouse master, Grimshaw. He saw Lord Ashworth's signature on a procurement order for anatomical supplies. This wasn't fiction. This was the blueprint for a horror far greater than any he could have invented. A flicker of the journalist he used to be sparked back to life. He saw the story of a lifetime, a story that could redeem his ruined career if he lived to write it. The plan was set for the night of the winter solstice, the longest and darkest night of the year, when a new shipment of supplies was due from the workhouse. Machen's role was to get the story out. He was to deliver copies of key pages from the ledger to the few honest inspectors at Scotland Yard and to a rival newspaper, timed to coincide with the chaos Kit would unleash. He was creating the narrative that would frame the disaster not as an accident, but as the bloody conclusion of a monstrous conspiracy. Kit, meanwhile, prepared for his final act. He moved through the ironworks like a wraith, using his small size to access service tunnels and maintenance shafts. He gathered materials, flasks of volatile machine oil, lengths of hemp rope, a set of stolen wrenches. As midnight approached, he made his way to the central regulator. The chamber was a roaring, screeching inferno of noise and heat, a place no mortal was meant to linger. He saw the main pressure valve, a massive iron wheel that required the strength of 3 men to turn. But he also saw the emergency release system, a series of smaller secondary valves that, if opened in the wrong sequence, would cause a catastrophic, explosive pressure cascade. As he began his work, a shadow fell over him. A silent warden on its patrol route stood in the doorway. It was Unit 37, his father. Its serene, placid face, the one Croft had so carefully crafted, was a grotesque mockery of the man he remembered. The warden's head tilted, its internal sensors registering an anomaly. It took a step towards him, its movements smooth and silent. Kit didn't panic. He held up the ledger, opened to the page with his father's name. "Daniel," he whispered, his voice cracking. "They did this to you. They took you." The warden, of course, did not react. It was a machine. But as it reached for him, its programming identifying him as an intruder, Kit did something unplanned, an act of pure, desperate instinct. He began to sing, a soft, halting rendition of an old Irish lullaby his father used to sing to him. The song was a meaningless input to the warden's cerebral governor, but sound is vibration. The specific frequencies of the lullaby, the melody his father's own larynx had produced thousands of times, caused a minute sympathetic resonance in the delicate crystal regulators of the etheric heart. For a single, impossible second, the warden's clockwork rhythm faltered. It froze, its hand hovering inches from Kit's face. In its blank, doll-like eyes, Kit imagined he saw a flicker of something. A ghost of a memory, a conflict in the machine. That second was all he needed. He scrambled away, wrenched open the last valve in the sequence, and fled as alarms began to shriek, their sound drowned out by the rising, world-ending scream of failing steam. The heart of the Ashworth Ironworks did not just fail, it detonated. The pressure cascade Kit unleashed turned the entire subbasement into a superheated cauldron. The Reclamation Forge, with its vats of volatile chemicals and its rows of dormant wardens, was instantly vaporized. The explosion ripped upwards, tearing through the factory floor in a volcanic eruption of fire, steam, and molten steel. The great furnaces ruptured, their contents flooding the lower levels, encasing everything, including Dr. Croft and his monstrous creations, in a tomb of cooling iron. The ensuing fire raged for 3 days, a pillar of black smoke that could be seen all over London. Lord Harrington Ashworth was consumed in his top-floor office, his dreams of a steel empire reduced to ash alongside his military contracts. The official story, the one masterfully framed by Arthur R. Machen's anonymously leaked documents, was a sensation. It was a tale of a mad industrialist and a disgraced doctor conducting illegal experiments that led to a catastrophic industrial accident. The deaf-mute workers were tragic victims, their true nature forever buried under tons of slag and iron. The conspiracy was exposed, but its most unbelievable truth, the reanimation of the dead, was safely contained as a madman's rumor. Kit escaped through the sewer outlets that emptied into the Thames. He watched the inferno from across the river, a small, soot-stained ghost witnessing the funeral pyre he had lit. He had avenged his father and destroyed the source of the horror, but he was alone, carrying a terrible knowledge that he could never speak. He vanished into the anonymity of London's vast, teeming underbelly. Arthur Machen became a star. His explosive series of articles on the Ashworth atrocities made him the most famous journalist in England. He had his redemption, but it was a hollow one. He knew the story he told was only a shadow of the real truth. He spent the rest of his life haunted by the secrets he kept, his nights filled with dreams of ticking, clockwork hearts. The St. Giles workhouse was quietly closed after a sanitation review, its master, Mr. Grimshaw, retiring to a comfortable but secluded life in the country, his silence bought and paid for by men even more powerful than Ashworth. But the story does not end in fire and ash. Not every warden was destroyed. The Mark IV prototype, the colonial policing unit, had been shipped out the week before the disaster. It was on a cargo vessel, bound for a remote rubber plantation in the Belgian Congo, a place where the lines between man and machine, and life and death, were already blurred by unimaginable cruelty. And Dr. Silas Croft's reclamation ledger, the one Kit had clutched so tightly, was not the only one. Croft was a meticulous scientist. He kept duplicates of his most important research, encoded and sent by private courier to a silent partner, a fellow researcher at a university in Prussia who shared his ambition and his lack of scruples. The science was not destroyed. It had merely been displaced. The knowledge of how to mend flesh with steel, how to power a body with a clockwork heart, how to erase a soul and leave only a functioning machine was safe. It was waiting for a new forge, a new war, a new and more ambitious master. The fire had not been an ending. It had been a baptism, scattering the seeds of this new, terrible science across the globe. The legend of the Ashworth Ironworks was cast in steel and smoke, a cautionary tale of industrial greed and a mad scientist's hubris. The world accepted the story of a terrible accident because it was easier than accepting the truth, that for a brief, terrible moment in the heart of London, death had become a solvable engineering problem. Dr. Croft's work was not an aberration. It was the birth of a new and terrible gospel, the gospel of the flesh as a machine. He did not seek to conquer death. He sought to make it irrelevant, to render the human soul an obsolete component in an engine of perfect, tireless efficiency. The Silent Wardens were not monsters. They were the future, a future where human beings are no longer born but assembled. Where our wills are not our own, but are governed by a quiet, internal ticking we are taught to ignore. Look around you. The forge is no longer made of iron and fire. It is made of data and code. The etheric heart is the device in your hand, its rhythmic notification setting the pace of your day, its glow a constant, silent command. The cerebral governor is the subtle, powerful algorithm that filters your reality, calming your anxieties with distraction, replacing your messy, inconvenient thoughts with smoother, more efficient ones. You are being conditioned to be a more perfect worker, a more predictable consumer, a more placid citizen. You are being encouraged every day to replace the flawed, organic parts of yourself with a more reliable, more polished, and more controllable version. You are being reclaimed. Now is the moment to choose. Will you be a component in their machine, or will you reclaim your own soul? In the comments below, it is time to make your stand, to declare that you are more than the sum of your parts. Write it twice as an act of defiance. I am not a machine. I am not a machine. This is your declaration of independence, a signal that you can still hear the sound of your own, flawed, human heartbeat beneath the relentless ticking of their world. If you are ready to continue this fight, to expose the modern forges and the new architects of control, subscribe. Activate the notification bell, for the work of reclamation is silent and constant. Share this with one other person who you know still has a fire in their soul. They believe they can upgrade you. They believe they can fix your flaws. We are here to remind you that you're F. Laws are what make you human, and your humanity is the one thing they can never truly conquer.